Welcome to the Power of Design podcast, where we have inspiring conversations that explore the intersection of architecture, construction, and real estate, so we can understand the dynamics and trends that shape an exciting and powerful built environment. This is your host, Jack Osa. In today's episode of The Power of Design, I am talking to Josh McConaughey. He is a vice president at J.E. Dunn Construction in Charlotte, North Carolina. Josh is a transformational leader whose heart and hard work are felt in every business relationship and project he is involved with. During our conversation, we talk about leadership, the evolution of construction, and giving back to the community. This is my conversation with Josh. Josh, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I'm well, Jack. I hope you are.
Josh, you have extensive experience leading and growing teams that build not only high-quality buildings, but also high-quality relationships. What do you think is the single most important focus a leader should have in the construction industry today?
So, I think that the answer to this question is probably the same as it's always been for me. And I think that's a focus on our people. And I think today more than ever, that's increasingly important. This has been a hard year for everybody. Separation. We've talked several times, but I think this is the second time we've seen each other in person. And I was reminded of the importance of the people connection actually just recently. We had a young employee that's been with us for about 5 years that I think we lost touch with over this time, candidly. He came to us and said, I'm thinking about a new opportunity. And it reminded me really quickly that at the end of the day, construction and our business is a service-oriented business.
Yep.
What we offer and what we sell is our people. And it's critical for us as leaders to remain fully engaged with our teams, both internally and externally to our clients, because they are not hiring J.E. Dunn per se. Ultimately that brand becomes important, but they are hiring not only just me, but the leaders and the team that I've hired and mentored over years.
Sure. And, construction is one of those things that I think since the beginning of time, still the same, is people with materials and tools putting things together.
Exactly.
There is no technology that is gonna, change that, or you cannot do it remotely. You have to be there doing the work.
Yeah. And, even in this time, we were an essential workforce.
Yeah.
And so even though we all went to our jobs every day, we didn't come together as groups. So our project teams were on their projects. Our people that sit in the office were in the office. And so the simple ways of connecting with people that were oftentimes taken for granted now had to become intentional.
Right.
And so that question remains. It's people. And I think a lot of people don't realize that about our business.
Yeah, that's always what I really been very fascinated by architecture and construction. I think, architecture has been the same. You need to think about an idea, a design, but you need to draw it, and, you draw it by hand or with a computer, but you still need to do that. It's a very physical act, human act that, is going to always be like that.
Yeah, you can't get away from the B2C aspect of our business.
Yeah. Tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I always, anytime I'm in one of these situations or at a meeting, everybody says, tell me something unique about you that people probably don't know. And it always comes back to this. So I actually was born in Cairo, Egypt.
What?
Yeah. And I grew up for the first 7 years of my life, half time in Cairo and the other half of the time in New York. My mom was an archaeologist, and so she was there for a work assignment, and that's the reason I was born there.
That's awesome.
It was a pretty cool experience to grow up in that dynamic. It was a little hard in that, for 6 months at a time we were away. And I don't have a ton of memories of that time in my life, but I do remember, sort of the picturesque aspects of Cairo and the pyramids and all those neat things.
That's amazing. So have you been back?
I have not. No, I have not been back since I think I was 8 or 9. And the dynamics of that location of the world have changed a lot over the years.
Yeah.
So I do hope one day to go back.
Yeah.
I don't know when that day will be, but I certainly do hope to go back.
Man, that's really cool.
And then when I was 8, we moved to Connecticut, where I did kind of most of my fundamental growing up. Went to college in upstate New York. And so I spent a lot of my formidable years in that part of the country, a small town called New Milford. Yeah.
So when you start, graduating high school and you start looking at, what's the rest of your life, what are you going to do? How did you decide to get into, the field of construction?
Yeah. So I took a pretty untraditional path. I went to college at Rensselaer Polytechnic University here up in Albany, New York area. And I went there for a dual major in computer systems engineering and finance, of all things. In high school, I was one of those kids that grew up working with his hands, worked on construction projects, mostly home building then. I had a lawn service company. But about halfway through college, I kind of started to realize that construction was not just building homes in a residential environment. I started putting 2 and 2 together. I went to a career fair where they recruited Turner and Whiting Turner, and a lot of the bigger firms recruited for civil engineers.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in what would it be like to build one of these tall buildings and how does that happen? And they all said, you need to go back to graduate school. You don't have the right degree. And so in my junior year, I sort of switched courses mentally, at least. I finished my undergraduate degree and then I enrolled into a graduate program for construction management. And so really the path was around the concept that I enjoyed being around people. I really enjoyed the concept of being able to create something that sort of outlives us all.
Yeah.
And in what I was doing previous to getting into construction, that was not going to be a part of that career path. So,
yeah. And tell me about your first job.
Yeah. So my first job, while a lot of my friends bagged groceries or worked in retail, I chose to take a different path. And a good friend of mine and I started a lawn service business. His dad would build small subdivisions. And then so we would then wait for the people to move in the house and then pitch to them how it would be best if we mowed their lawn for them.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that, got to be outdoors a lot, kind of an entrepreneurial aspect to my life. And then when we both went off to college, we separated from that business. And then for the rest of the time, I would come back every summer and work for his dad's business.
Nice. Do you guys make good money?
In lawn service?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, in that part of the country, we did. I'll put it this way. I was able to buy my first car.
Nice.
With my earnings from
That's
that.
pretty good.
Yeah. So I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And how did you get into the construction, workforce?
So through internships, when I was in graduate school, I got really focused on trying to work my way into this side of the business. At the time, it was a real big deal for me to build big projects. I just was enamored with trying to work for one of the larger GCs in the country, only if for no other reason than to be taken away from where I grew up. I grew up in a really small town. So the idea of being able to go to a big city and build a big building was really interesting to me. So I interned for a little bit in Hartford, Connecticut when I was going to grad school. I interned a summer in Cincinnati, Ohio, and got to work in a big city on a project right in downtown. And then when I was finishing grad school, I just really said, I want to go to one of the bigger cities. So Florida, Denver, California. I kind of interviewed in all those spots and ultimately chose to start my career with my previous firm in Miami, Florida.
And I guess being in New York, that's one of the most inspirational places in terms of construction. All the, not only historic structures, but all the new, the latest and greatest, they're always in New York. About 2 years ago, we took a trip with my family. I have 3 kids and, we've been some places, but they live in Charlotte and they kind of think like, yeah, Charlotte it's a city. And we're like, okay, we're going to go to New York City. You'll see a real city. And it was awesome. We were there for about 2 weeks. And, we tour, all the big buildings, all the new things that are happening. And it's just mind blowing. When I see those structures, and you think about the amount of coordination, thinking, effort, collaboration that needs to happen to make those structures happen is mind blowing.
It is. And, I think being near those big cities growing up, it was probably what drove me to want to do what I did. It is funny though, growing up there, that you take for granted what you have right in your backyard.
Right.
I probably can count the times on my two hands that my friends and I left Connecticut, which was only an hour and 15 minutes to the city, and actually went down there to experience what now would take an effort, Herculean effort, to get to.
Yeah.
So it's funny the way you look at it in hindsight, though.
Oh yeah, and sometimes, when we're doing projects today, traditional projects, and we start thinking about, let's say you're working with certain structure or structural engineer, and you need to do a cantilever or an arch, and like, oh my God, no, be careful. Like, we're all very careful about, like, can you do this or not? But go back even to, 200-300 years ago, and these massive cathedrals built with zero technology, and they're still there, and they work, and they're fine. The human ingenuity in construction, how impactful that is.
I think we all today could probably go back in time and learn something from
how
they used to do it.
They will be laughing at us today that we get scared about very simple construction challenges.
Well, I think some of the difference is that back then there was a true art form. The word craftsman was real then. And I think, unfortunately, our business, and I think partially because it's become quite a business, that we've lost touch with that aspect of it.
Yeah. So tell me about your role today. What do you do? What are your responsibilities? Tell me about J.E. Dunn as a company.
Yeah. So I run the commercial group for J.E. Dunn here in Charlotte. J.E. Dunn is still a family-owned private company. 25% of that ownership is actually an employee stock ownership program, which we as an organization think is a true differentiator. Headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri. And I tell you, the first trip I took to Kansas City, Missouri to see the headquarters, I was amazed with the fact that the son of John Ernst Dunn, who started the company, is 94 or 5 years old and still comes to the office a few days a week.
That's awesome.
And it was a real honor to see him and to recognize the fact that he really did appreciate every one of his employees. So, and J.E. Dunn here, since I've been here for 3 years, I joined in 2017. Our focus in my market is multifamily, office, corporate interiors, hospitality, and public markets. Here also locally, we focus on aviation, healthcare, and then in our Raleigh market, life sciences and education.
So how's a typical day for you? Like you get to the office in the morning. What kind of things do you do?
I think what I like so much about this business is that there is no real typical day. Other than the fact that the day starts early and typically ends late.
Yeah.
What happens in between those bookmarks is different every day.
Yeah.
Because of my role at any given point in time, I may have, anywhere from 3 to 10 projects to be worrying about. And each day, a unique aspect of one of those projects comes, whether I'm out on the site walking, whether I'm traveling because we have some corporate relationships and clients that we serve outside of the market. Each day is a little bit unique and a little bit different. But, the consistent themes of each day are engagement with our clients, engagement with our trade partners, and engagement with our internal people to ensure that we're delivering on the promises we committed on.
Yeah. And how big is your team, or what are the internal dynamics you have?
Yeah, so J.E. Dunn is about $4.5 billion company nationally. Here in the Carolinas, we're about $150 million business. And we have just over 100 employees that help service that workload.
And in your day-to-day, how do you manage things that you need to delegate, have others do, and how do you differentiate what are the tasks that you need to focus on?
It's a good question. I think almost everybody in this business is very task oriented.
Yeah.
I think you have to be. Most of us are engineers by mindset or architects, also very driven in that regard. For me, I do the very best I can to empower my teams to handle as much as they can and take as much rope as they can manage with, right?
Yeah.
My dad always said, I'll give you enough rope to hang yourself, but I never want you to hang yourself, right? So stay close enough and I'll be there. And I take that same approach with my team. I check in enough to know when I feel like they need my help. And then I let them run, and I hope that they do so and reach out as they need. A couple things that I spend a lot of my time on is a lot of the upfront engagement. So, as opportunities arise, seeking out those opportunities and working collaboratively with our pre-construction team and marketing team through the RFPs and the pursuits is probably where I spend kind of the most amount of consistent time.
Yeah.
That's something that I often don't delegate because I really try to allow our project teams to focus on the execution component and allow me to try to backfill those opportunities.
Sure. How do you personally keep learning, improving, and getting better at what you do?
Yeah. So, I think that for me, I've been fortunate in my career to have a lot of good training and mentors. I think I learned a lot early in my career through mentors. My career is interesting since I got to Charlotte. I moved here in 2007. At the time, I was with Balfour Beatty Construction. And in the midst of that transition, we acquired RT Dooley Construction. And so, there's a lot of great leaders from that organization that I had the fortune to work with. Dave and Bob and Chris Butlak and Tim Garrison, all those folks served in a mentor capacity to me at some point in my career along the way. And so I learned a lot from them. But somebody who grew up in the trades and working with his hands, I've always learned a lot by doing, right? And so a lot of my growth and experience was just being able to be given the opportunities to try something I'd never tried. And in my role, every day is different. So almost every day I'm challenged with a new experience that I have to work my way through.
Yeah.
I will tell you though, that as of late, as my career's progressed, I've started to focus a lot on community engagement. I've had the fortune to get involved in a couple of nonprofit boards, and I've been active in several nonprofit organizations, Classroom Central, YMCA, CBI, Goodfellows. And through that endeavor, I've really gotten exposed to a broader span of people.
Yeah.
And I think that what I've learned from that is how different everybody is and how that difference still creates a community. And I've realized that you can't really stop learning until you understand what everybody else is going through in a given day. And that engagement I've had through those nonprofits and really seeing what they're all about and the impacts that they make have really helped me grow personally over time. And then lastly, I would say, so I'm a father of 3 little kids. My oldest just turned 8 the other day. And I think every day you learn something from your children. Oh, yeah. For me, I've learned a lot about trying to just live in the moment, try to have a little bit more fun,
right,
and a lot of patience,
as
you could imagine, right? So on the personal front, I think that they and my family have taught me quite a bit over the years.
Yeah. Where do you think that interest and passion for community focus come from?
I grew up in a really small town, and then I went to a relatively small college. It was one of those places where you kind of knew everybody.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Charlotte, one of the most intimidating things about coming to the big city and not being from here was that I felt like I would just be a number that would fade into the background.
Yeah.
And for a lot of years, that was probably exactly the way it was. And I realized that connection with community would start to allow Charlotte to feel like a true home for me. I've always felt a passion for the underserved in our community. Working poor, education. My wife was a teacher for many years, and I understood the struggles she faced. And I just thought it was important for me to connect with the place I've chosen to live in a way that allowed me to make it feel like home.
Yeah.
And it's made a real profound impact on me as an individual.
Sure.
And I've been really honored to do it. And I'll tell you, it has really opened up my network, and not in a selfish way, but candidly in a way that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
The fact that there's a lot of times I can go somewhere and see people that I know, whether they're in this business or they're engaged with me through the nonprofits. It just excites me to make it feel like it's small again.
Yeah, that's definitely one way. It's a truthful way to give back to focus, because even if you give your time, time is valuable, and just giving time to those opportunities, connections, that's a lot of contribution that you're having. And the fact that the byproduct of that might be business relationships, that's even better, because you're doing a lot of things at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you truly give more than you could ever expect to get.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. And honestly, why I love it so much.
Sure.
There is no agenda to it.
Yeah.
Right. I really do enjoy the opportunities to support others and to support those who have made a choice in their lives and careers to dedicate everything they have to making the world a better place and our community, candidly, a better place.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think makes you good at what you do? What's your superpower?
Oh God. I mean, that's a really difficult question for me to answer. But I guess I'd have to say it kind of comes down to a few things. This is not an easy business. And so, drive, commitment, perseverance are all qualities I think I have. And I think they're really necessary in this business to advance. I think that relationships, I've always thought of myself as a connector, someone who really enjoys getting others to connect over time and form relationships and see where that goes. And with the engineering side of me, problem solving, right? I mean, those aspects are really, I think, what have helped me get to where I am in my career. I also say that, at the end of the day, there's always a lot of luck and timing in this, right? That I don't know if you've read the book Outliers with Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah. And I always think about that and the generation that I'm in and the growth that Charlotte's experienced in this time. And the fact that, I was coming up at the appropriate age to help lead teams during the height of some of the boom efforts here in Charlotte. It's a good fortune that I've had to have timed it appropriately.
Yeah. No, I think you can add to that podcast guest, because you're one of the most articulate guests that I had for real.
Really?
Yeah, you explain things much better than what I love to talk like that.
Yeah, thanks.
So during your, day-to-day activities, tell me about your clients. What type of clients do you work for? What's your ideal client? How do you help them?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, here in the Carolinas, we kind of have 5 key business focuses: healthcare, aviation, education out in Raleigh, life sciences, and then for me, commercial. So, I get to touch the most broad of all of those sectors. And so the clients that we engage with are all over the board, from private developers to the city of Charlotte, to, single-use tenants in small projects. And when I think about our ideal client, I think back to kind of sort of J.E. Dunn's mission statement and some of the things that we try to do to drive our business. And one of our key focuses is inspired people and places. And so in trying to find the ideal client, we really try to look for clients that have an alignment with that mindset.
Yeah, that's huge.
J.E. Dunn is never going to be the lowest cost offering you'll find. And although the market continues to fight us on the concept of becoming a commodity, we really don't believe us to be. I think it's one of the worst things you can ever say is that construction's a commodity, because construction's about people. And I don't think people are commodities. And so what we really try to do is find clients that align with the appreciation of people and the appreciation of place. I'll use one as an example. We just finished the Grand Bohemian Hotel with the Kessler Collection. And you want to talk about, their tagline for their hotels is inspired places. So what a better alignment.
That's alignment right there. Yeah.
We actually built our first hotel for them in Orlando, Florida over 20 years ago. And so that's a relationship that's been here for a really long time. And so they're that perfect example of a client. Another one, Childress Klein, that we're finishing a project for here in South Park. What a fantastic client for us. They truly do focus on building inspired places and inspiring the people that live in them, because they're making place places for people to live.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how we try to find that ideal client for us, that we try to find an alignment with what they're trying to achieve in their buildings and their places with our mission statement.
Yeah. One of the things that for me as an architect, I always try to understand from the construction world. So a general contractor, you're not actually doing the work. You're hiring people to do the work, right? The subcontractors, right?
Sometimes.
And usually there's subcontractors in a certain marketplace, and many different GCs, they tap to all those subcontractors. So, one GC or the other one, they may use the same subcontractors. And I think the differentiator is where that relationship with that subcontractor and the direct relationship of how they perform on your project. So how does that work? What do you think is the difference that you guys bring to the marketplace that no other competitor can do?
That's a good question. Going back to a typical day, I will tell you that one of the other places I spend a lot of my time is in the relationships I have with trade partners. I always like to think of myself and my teams as tough but fair. And it is true that all of us general contractors pull from the same group of trade partners.
Yeah.
That said, not all trade partners are created equal. Mm-hmm. And the pool that we pull from may not be from the same pool that others are pulling from.
Right.
But I think what enables us to differentiate the quality of the projects that we deliver are the relationships and the commitments we have from those trusted trade partners.
Yep.
The way we treat them, the way we pay on time, the way we address issues when they arise. I think that really is part of what helps differentiate us as an organization. We don't look at them as a means to an end. We look at them as a partner in the endeavor to do what we're trying to do for our clients.
Sure.
And engage them fully in the process.
And in some way, they are your client as well.
They are. And most of them are now my friend. Yeah. I think that a lot of them have transitioned to a truly friendship business. And so, I think about that when we're struggling on a project, like any job will always have issues. I don't care who you're talking to. It doesn't matter. There will always be something on every project. Sure. And the importance of building that relationship, not transactional, but truly a relationship with those people that I call friends, is what enables me to pick up the phone and say, I need your help this time. I really could use you above and beyond. I know it's not your issue. I know it's not your fault, but we still have to deliver for this client. And please do everything you can to help me. And I think having that kind of humble approach really helps to allow us to differentiate ourselves.
We'll be right back with more from the Power of Design podcast.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
So this podcast is called The Power of Design, and I created it because in my mind, I think what we're doing is delivering construction and value to our client. So our clients, people, they can use these buildings, right? Mm-hmm. But to create this built environment, we need a lot of people, right? We as the design industry, we go as far as, understanding the space, designing, drawings, renderings, but at some point we stop. We cannot deliver the whole thing ourselves. The same way the construction side, you build it, but you need to build something. You need a guideline. So it's like a true partnership. Yeah. But we do it that isolated. Like you're on your own company, on your own things. I'm on my own thing. I'm here. We kind of come together for projects. Same way, we are also dependent on financial transactions, banking, real estate, brokers. If there is no money to execute a project, there is nothing to draw, there is nothing to build. So the podcast, I created it because I wanted to have close conversations, deeper conversation about those relationships, because at the end of the day, to create this built environment like the one we're experiencing today, we needed that for real. So tell me about, what do you think is the ideal relationship or workflow when you have a design and construction team together? What is that perfect chemistry that should be happening to create the successful project?
The funny thing about this question is that the answer is really obvious. Yet I think it continues to be missed by the market over and over and over and over again. You talk about the ideal client. You asked, what type of clients we work with. And anytime we have an opportunity to meet with a client, we try our very best to communicate that getting the team together as early as possible is your best path to success.
Yes.
And I can't tell you how many times we message this and communicate that. And unfortunately, in what oftentimes is a very procurement-driven world, it's really hard to get everybody to be on board to that. So the benefit of that is that it enables all members of this team to work collectively and collaboratively from the day the design becomes something that we're really thinking about building. Yeah. And so that all members of that team have that level of accountability. And candidly, like I just talked about with trade partners, we begin to develop that friendship and relationship, because just like we're going to deal with issues on the site, we're going to have the same on the design side. Have you ever drawn a perfect set of documents?
Never.
Right. And have we ever gotten every detail right? And the answer is never.
Right.
But when you have those teams collectively and collaboratively together, I really do think it creates the right spirit of delivery.
Yeah.
And, everybody, when you're on board early, feels like you're working towards that same end, unbeknownst to, not that the price isn't a key component, but that's not the factor that we're all here to work towards when you get that engagement. And, of all the questions you'll probably ask, to me, this one's really the most obvious, but yet I still continue to struggle with how we don't find ourselves there. Now, I will tell you, as of late, I have started to see that the market is beginning to change a little bit, that there is beginning to see a lot more early engagement.
Yeah.
And certain owners, certain municipalities are beginning to embrace that concept.
Yeah.
And so I'm encouraged to see that.
Yeah. You know what's one of the symptoms or flags that we're not there yet? How many times you get a sketch or a floor plan and you're asked to provide a budget. Like this, I don't even have enough information to give you something back, but it's expected that you should do it. And we take these big risks and gambles because it's like 90% assumptions. And same from the design side. It's like, well, yeah, how much are the design fees for a house? Okay, how big is the house? Like, there's a lot of work that needs to happen in order to really quantify and understand the built environment.
Absolutely.
But I think we somewhere, somehow, we were complacent and got to the point where, and we react to that and we don't raise the bar. Because what do? Crappy test fits and we give fees. So they're like, oh yeah, it can be done. You give a project range. And so we respond to that. And that's not helping at all.
No,
that's not helping anybody.
And I can't say I blame the client, because I think about myself as a consumer and I recognize oftentimes that price is always a factor in what I'm doing.
Yes.
And so I get the approach. I think the difference in this is that there's a humanistic element to it. And like I said before, as service-related businesses, we offer our people and our talents. And it's challenging to try to fit that in a box the same you fit a refrigerator that you had to go buy in the box. And sometimes I feel like that's kind of what the market asks us to do.
Sure.
So I don't know that I have the answer to how to fix it, but I certainly see the way that we can align better as to all get on those teams sooner.
Yeah. How do you see the design and construction industry evolving in the future?
I think that there's a few things that will start to happen in the future. I think that just to go on the point we discussed, I do think that the future holds better opportunities for us to get out of the more linear, traditional design, bid, build, procurement model. And I say that because I have begun to see some transitions. Some of our large clients who you wouldn't expect to take on design assist or design build approaches are beginning to. City of Charlotte municipalities are beginning to embrace that concept. And so I do think that there are starting to be some fundamental shifts in that concept of how do we procure work in the future that creates a more harmonious environment during the experience. Because I think people truly do believe that part of the value is the experience of getting from point A to point B, from concept to opening. I think another piece is undoubtedly technology. Now, our business is difficult in that we'll never get away from individuals that have to be on project sites physically doing the work. But when I say technology, I think it's going to be oriented to the way that we engage in our interactions with our clients. And I'll use an example of where we've done this recently. So I mentioned we've been doing some work out of town with a large corporate client. And although we could travel and we could manage the project, the designer who was engaged was not local and the client was not allowed to go. And so one of the things that we did was we worked hard to bring the project to them. So the use of VR and augmented reality, we modeled the entire place. We allowed the selections to be made virtually, and we allowed that end user client to really experience that space before they committed to the space. Now, I don't know what that means for all of them because it's not a cheap endeavor, but I do believe that our human interaction going forward will change. And so I do think technology will continue to play a bigger part in the way that we communicate around our business. Not necessarily how we build the business, not necessarily how we build our projects, but certainly in the way that we communicate the results and track the results of our projects.
Yeah, I think, the progress that we see in construction is when you see, let's say, like progress in materials or development of certain things, but, steel is built the same forever and masonry is masonry. There are some things that they just are what they are. Where I really think the breakthrough is going to happen, and I don't know when, is 3D printing. Because, we have seen like 3D printing houses, that they're doing these little things. But I think the breakthrough is going to be when we have these 3D printers that they're, the size of a stadium and you can print buildings.
Yeah. And I think that aligns with what I was going to say is the third piece of how the industry is going to trend. And I think the concept of, and you can use the word prefabrication, but I think the idea of limiting the human engagement in the execution of the work is going to be paramount. And I say that because as we talked about before the podcast started, or even during the podcast, the craftsmanship.
Yeah.
That's changed. So I'm seeing drywall contractors using CNC machines to create perfect right angles on drywall before it comes to the site. We're seeing mechanical contractors do a lot of prefabrication. And I think the value for that is where risks happen on projects is in controlling of the manpower and the sourcing, right?
Yep.
And so by eliminating the safety risks associated with doing work on site, by eliminating the amount of time we thought it would take to hang the ductwork on a certain floor of a building, by controlling that outside of that built environment, and 3D printing, similar concept, right? That printer is going to produce a result in X amount of time. It's guaranteed. And it limits the amount of risk associated with whether or not that person is as efficient and effective or that they put together the quality in the right way in the field.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's going to be a big evolution. I don't think we're going to have robots out there building our projects, but I do think that conceptually taking the risk factors of execution in the field off the table more.
Yep.
Through prefabrication, through pre-assembly is going to be a big change in our industry going forward.
Yeah, and even there are things that it could be just a reaction to what's happening, like let's say driverless cars, and I really think in a short distance future, it's going to be just a bad decision to own a car. Right? Because I think the car is the most underutilized object we own because it's parked all the time. We just use it to drive here and there. And it's just sitting there.
Do you think that means I'll have to walk here from Waxhaw in the future?
Pretty much.
Okay.
But everything is going to be, sharing cars. And you go to an app and a car is going to take you and you don't need to own a car. So you start thinking about, okay, we don't need this parking decks anymore. So how do we repurpose of these spaces? And that's going to really change the built environment.
I think so. Absolutely.
So reacting to all those other progresses in other areas of, technology, it also impacts the construction. What's interesting about construction is that you build something and hopefully you build it for 20, 50 years. It's supposed to be like a big investment because you cannot just move a building. But I think the next level is when we start creating flexible construction that somehow you will adapt and change to the new requirements and adapt to, whatever new requirements are happening for the users.
Yeah. I mean, with the cost of construction today, it becomes ever more challenging for our clients to adapt their facilities to the new needs of the users and the built environment.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be realistic for hotels to try to do things every 7 years or clients to refit their offices every X amount of years.
Yeah.
So there's something there for sure.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest challenge your clients are facing today?
So I would say there's probably no size that fits all with this question. I mean, every client has different challenges. And I would have certainly said that prior to 2020. But obviously in this year, I think that the biggest challenge for everybody is the environment we're going through with COVID, right? I mean, that's probably a very obvious answer, but it's true.
Sure.
Now, the way that is affecting different clients is different. And so, on one hand, we have office clients who are struggling to determine when are my workers going into space. For example, a space we just turned over, they're supposed to have about 300 people eventually move in there. We moved in 5 on day 1 in about 60,000 square feet. So, that office user is trying to figure out what does that look like for us in the future. Of our hospitality clients that are struggling to even just get financing, get people back to work, and struggling with determining, is Uptown the right market for us? Or, will people ever come back to our hotels? And if they do, what is it going to look like? And so I think that the pandemic has had a truly profound impact on all of our clients, but in different ways. And I still don't know that anybody's really figured it out.
Oh, no.
And so, I wish that I had a way to forecast what they were going to do or what we're all going to do to get out of this. But I will tell you that I think across the board, it's probably the single biggest impact that I've seen in my career around all our clients.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing mentally for everybody is the sense of uncertainty. It's hard to plan. We don't know what's going to happen. So that paralyzes people. I think by nature, I'm very optimistic and I'm very positive. So I was thinking that it's going to be better. It's going to be better. And I really think that, at some point, this is just going to be a hump in the road and we're going to overcome it. We're going to get a vaccine. Somebody's going to come up with something. We're going to get better, and I don't know when, but when that happens, I think we all are so excited about going back to normal that things are going to come back in a big way.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a wave of work and excitement and energy that is going to inundate the marketplace. And I think we're perfectly positioned to take advantage of that wave.
Yeah, I share your optimism. I mean, I don't know exactly when this will happen, but I remain very optimistic that when we look back at this, whether it be in 5 years or 10 years or just 2 years, that we'll all have some interesting stories to tell. Can you believe that we thought that the world was over? And I don't say that to sound crass, because I recognize that this has had a profound impact on a lot of people's families. You know, loss of life is terrible. But I think that if you look longer term, we as a society and just the nature of humans we get over things. We have to, right? And when you're in the midst of the recession in 2008, 9, and 10, I think nobody thought we'd ever figure it out. And, I remember 9/11, nobody would want to get on an airplane.
Yeah.
And then the airline industry exploded better than it ever been. So I'm optimistic in the, just the resilience of people and our society. And I'm grateful that we're in a place like Charlotte, because I do think that of all places that'll bounce back really strongly, this will be one of them.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
How does the power of design impact who you are and what you do?
That's kind of one of those questions that's like a little bit of an enigma.
Yeah.
Right. But the truth is that it's kind of everything. And when I say that, I mean that design is placemaking and place is everything. So, for me, when I think about the word design, to me, it's the start of almost everything. That from your phone to your clothes to your car, design either works or it doesn't work for you, right? There's users of iPhones, and then there's users of the Samsung product. And when design doesn't work, you never hear the end of it. Yeah. And when design works, you never hear the end of it. You create these amazing places that inspire people to go to sleep, to drink, to eat, to vacation, to go to work. But if it doesn't work, the outcomes are really bad.
Sure.
And, design also can have a profound impact on life. I mean, you just think about, what Boeing experienced in the past year with a flawed design on the 737 MAX, right? And that's an example of design going horrifically wrong.
Oh, yeah.
In a very, very bad way. But on the flip side, design of airplanes over the years has gone so right for so long that it's changed the built environment. It's changed our world.
Yeah.
And so when you ask, the power of design, how it impacts me, I mean, every decision I make is around preference of design.
Yeah.
And candidly, it's around preference of the architects that we work with, right? I mean, the design either works and is easy to figure out and build, or it's not. And it has a profound impact on the success or failure of the project. So I think it's a really interesting way to look at it. Until you ask the question, I never really whittled down that idea of the power of design and the fact that I think that it is the start, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the first stroke of that pen to paper begins that idea, right? And it's really an amazing thing.
Yeah, I know.
I'm telling the guy that knows. So,
well, Josh, thank you so much for your time today,
Thank
man.
you.
I really appreciate who you are, and I really admire everything that you're doing. And thank you for your time, and I look forward to stay in touch and do stuff together.
Thanks, Jack. I'll end with saying, we talked about design build. One of the first project that I ever did at J.E. Dunn was I called Jack, and it wasn't a big project, but it was one of our first.
But it was real and happy
it was
client.
real, and it was exciting. So, Jack, thank you for having me.
No problem, man. Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Find out more about Jack and Osa Studio at osastudio.com and follow us on Instagram at The Power of Design Podcast. Thank you.